Welcome back. In this video, we will be going over the remaining lines of Form 1040. In the previous tax credits video, we skipped line 13, which we will go over now. Line 13 is for the qualified business deduction, and upon deducting it, the taxpayer will arrive at their taxable income. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act introduced in 2018 a qualified business income deduction for pass-through entities that permits pass-through businesses to be taxed on only 80% of their income. This QBI deduction was necessary to keep pass-through business tax rates reasonably in line with corporate tax rates, which were reduced to 21% under the TCJA, when stacked on top of qualified dividends or long-term capital gains tax rates. The core of the qualified pass-through business income deduction is that shareholders will simply be permitted to deduct 20% of the business income against itself, which can be claimed as a below-the-line, after adjusted gross income, deduction for tax purposes and entered here on line 13. Going on to line 14, which is for adding 12C, the taxpayer's total itemized or standard deduction, and 13, which was the qualified business deduction. Line 15 is for subtracting line 14, the taxpayer's total itemized deductions, from line 11, the taxpayer's total adjusted gross income. Line 16 is for entering tax. The IRS provides tax tables to make it easier for certain taxpayers to figure their income tax due. A taxpayer with $100,000 or more in taxable income will not use the tax tables, and they must use the tax computation worksheet. Based on the tax return for Emily Green that we have been filling out, her tax is $4,645, and we will enter that on line 16. Line 17 is for Schedule 2, line 3. Going to Schedule 2, we see that the total from Part 1 is the amount that will be entered on Form 1040, line 17. Line 1 of Schedule 2 is for the alternative minimum tax, which is designed to keep wealthy taxpayers from using loopholes to avoid paying taxes. To figure if a taxpayer owes the alternative minimum tax, they will fill out Form 6251. To compensate for inflation, the AMT includes an exemption amount, which is adjusted for inflation. The form begins by using adjusted gross income from Form 1040. Many of the taxes that the taxpayer was allowed to deduct are added back to their income for the AMT. If the tax calculated is higher than what was calculated on Form 1040, the difference must be paid as AMT. For example, let's say we have two taxpayers who are filing jointly with an alternative minimum tax income of $394,600. The exemption amount, which is adjusted annually for inflation, of $114,600 for the tax year, will be subtracted, giving the minimum tax base of $280,000. For purposes of this example only, let us say that the current tax year AMT applies at a rate of 28% to the excess of $199,000 for married filing jointly taxpayers. Up to $199,000 will be taxed at the amount of 26%. $199,000 times 0.26, which is 26%, equals $51,740. The remaining amount, $280,000 minus $199,000, is subject to the rate of 28%, which equals $22,680. You add up the amounts to get the total alternative minimum tax. Emily's income is under the amount for which she must pay the AMT, so she does not need to fill out Form 6251. Line 2 of Schedule 2 is for the excess advance premium tax credit repayment. The premium tax credit, known as the PTC, is a refundable credit that helps eligible individuals and families cover the premiums for their health insurance purchased through the health insurance marketplace. Line 2 of Schedule 2 is used to report the excess of the advanced premium tax credit. Line 3 is to add lines 1 and 2 together, and then the total is entered on Form 1040, line 17. Emily did not have anything to enter on either of these lines, so her total is 0. Back on Form 1040, line 18 is an add line for line 16 and 17. From the previous video, we found line 19 to be $480, and we found line 20 to be 0. On line 21, we add lines 19 and 20. On line 22, we subtract line 21 from line 18, getting a total of $4,165. Line 23 of Form 1040 is the amount from line 21 of Schedule 2, which is the total of other taxes. And so we will go back to Schedule 2 to fill out the second part. Line 4 of Schedule 2 is for the self-employment tax. How to fill out Schedule SE will be detailed in the small business video. Though for right now, we will take the amount from Emily's Schedule SE. This amount is $1,057. Line 5 of Schedule 2 is for the Social Security and Medicare tax on unreported tip income. Unreported Social Security and Medicare tax from two sources, tips and wages, will be calculated and entered on this line. IRS Form 4137, Social Security and Medicare tax on unreported tip income, is used to calculate the amount of Social Security and Medicare tax owed on tip income that was not reported to an employer, including any allocated tip shown on Form W-2. Line 6 of Schedule 2 is for uncollected Social Security and Medicare tax on wages. IRS Form 8919, uncollected Social Security and Medicare tax on wages, is used to pay Social Security and Medicare tax on wages received from a firm when the taxpayer is deemed to be an employee of the firm and not an independent contractor, and the firm did not withhold the taxes from the taxpayer's wages. Line 7 is to add up lines 5 and 6. We will now move on to line 8. An additional tax may be triggered by either an early distribution of an IRA or other tax-deferred retirement account, excess contributions from a traditional or Roth IRA, Cloverdale ESA, Archer Medical Savings Account, MSA, or a health savings account, HSA, or failure to take a minimum distribution from a retirement plan. The additional tax is entered here. Line 9 is for household employee taxes. If the taxpayer hired someone to do household work and was able to control what they did and how they did it, then the taxpayer had a household employee. Once the taxpayer determines that the household employment taxes will need to be paid, Schedule H, Household Employment Taxes, is completed and filled out. The instructions to Schedule H and form can be reviewed, which include the wage limits used to determine if Schedule H must be filed. Line 10 is for repayment of the first-time homebuyer credit. A taxpayer's income falls into certain limits is able to take a tax credit for the first time that they buy a home. If the taxpayer sells the home within 4 years of buying the home, then they must pay back some of the credit. The amount that they must pay back is calculated on IRS Form 5405, and the taxpayer will enter the total that must be paid on Schedule 2, Line 10. Line 11 of Schedule 2 is the additional Medicare tax. A taxpayer may be subject to a 0.9% additional Medicare tax that applies to Medicare wages, Railroad Retirement Act compensation, and self-employment income over a threshold based on their filing status. IRS Form 8959 Additional Medicare Tax is used to report the additional tax. The threshold is index adjusted annually, and the current threshold is discussed in the recent Tax Changes and Updates reading assignment. Line 12 of Schedule 2 is for the net investment income tax of Form 8960. NIIT is a 3.8% tax on the lesser of net investment income or the excess of an individual's modified adjusted gross income over a threshold amount. IRS Form 8960, Net Investment Income Tax, Individuals, Estates, and Trusts, is used to report this tax. Calculating the net investment income tax for individuals is a 4-step process. 1. Calculate by how much modified adjusted gross income exceeds the relevant threshold. 2. Calculate the net investment income for the year. 3. Take the lesser of the amounts in step 1 or step 2. And 4. Multiply the amount in step 3 by 3.8%, the net investment income tax rate. Line 13 of Schedule 2 is for uncollected Social Security and Medicare, or RRTA tax on tips. This tax should be shown in Box 12 of Form W-2 with codes A and B, or M and N. Line 14 is for interest on tax due on installment income from the sale of certain residential lots. Interest on tax due on installment income from the sale of certain residential lots and timeshares are entered here. Line 15 is for interest on the deferred tax on gain from certain installment sales. Enter interest on the deferred tax on gain from certain installment sales with a sales price over $150,000. Line 16 is for recapture of low-income housing credit. Form 8611 recapture of low-income housing credit is used to recapture part of the low-income housing credit that a taxpayer claimed in previous years because a qualified basis decreased from one year to the next, or the taxpayer disposed of a building or their interest and they did not follow the procedures that would have prevented recapture of the credit. Line 17 is for entering other additional taxes. Other additional taxes listed on this line include recapture of other credits, recapture of federal mortgage subsidy, and other various additional taxes. Line 18 is a total line, adding line 17A to 17Z. Line 19 is for additional tax from Schedule 8812. This line is used for additional tax on excess advanced child tax credit payments. If the taxpayer received advanced child tax credits during 2021, and the credits figured using Schedule 8812 are less than what the taxpayer received, they may owe an additional tax. The taxpayer will receive a letter 6419 if they received advanced tax credit payments during 2021. The information from this letter is used to figure the amount of child tax credit to claim on the taxpayer's 2021 tax return or the amount of additional tax they must report on this line. Our taxpayer, Emily Green, received additional child tax credits, though her tax credits figured on 8812 in the tax credits video was more than her advanced child tax credit payments during 2021, and so she does not owe any additional tax. Line 20 is for the Section 965 Net Tax Liability Installment from Form 965A. IRC Section 965 Net Tax Liability Installment Form 965A, Individual Report of Net Tax, should be used by individual taxpayers and entities taxed like individuals, for example, certain estates and trusts. This form is used to report a taxpayer's net 965 tax liability for each tax year in which a taxpayer must report or pay Section 965 amounts. Section 965 is a transition tax on the untaxed foreign earnings of certain specified foreign corporations as if those earnings had been earned in the United States. For additional information on what Form 965A is used to report, see the reading material. Line 21 is used to add lines 4, 7 through 16, 18, and 19. This amount is transferred to Form 1040, line 23. We will go to Form 1040, line 23, which is transferred from Schedule 2, line 21. This amount is $1,057 for Emily. Line 24 is used to add line 22 and 23 of Form 1040. Form 1040, line 25A to D, is for federal income tax withheld from A, Forms W-2, B, Forms 1099, and C, other forms. D is to add lines 25A through 25C. The taxpayer's federal income tax withheld from Form W-2, Form 1099, and other forms is entered here. It may include backup withholdings and special refunds of Social Security tax. The amount withheld is a credit that offsets the total tax imposed. Line 25D is a total line. Emily had $4,500 federal income tax withheld on her Form W-2, and so we will enter that information on line 25A and total it on 25D. Form 1040, line 26, is for 2021 estimated tax payments and amounts applied from a 2020 tax return. This is 0 for Emily. Line 27 to 31 was filled out previously in the tax credits video. Going to Form 1040, line 32, add lines 27A and 28 through line 31. This equals $4,400 for Emily. Form 1040, line 33, is for adding lines 25D, 26, and 32, which equals $8,900. On Form 1040, line 34, line 24 is subtracted from line 33, which ends up with the amount overpaid in taxes. If the taxpayer is entitled to a refund, see the form instructions for information on having it directly deposited into one or more of their accounts or to purchase U.S. savings bonds instead of receiving a paper check. If there is a balance due on the tax return, the balance due must generally be paid by the original due date of the return to avoid any accrual penalties or interest. If a taxpayer cannot pay a tax balance due in full by the due date, then IRS Form 9465 Installment Agreement request is used to request a monthly installment plan. It is highly recommended that they pay a portion of the amount they owe and request an installment for the remaining balance. When e-filing a tax return, use IRS Form 8453, U.S. Individual Income Tax Transmittal, for an IRS e-file, and send any required paper forms or supporting documentation listed next to the checkbox on IRS Form 8453. Do not attach any form or document that's not shown next to the checkbox. If the taxpayer is required to mail in any documentation not listed on IRS Form 8453, they cannot file the tax return electronically. Well, that wraps up the end of filling out Form 1040. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for the next video, which will explain small business tax returns.